This is your co-host Phil, and with me as always is
your co-host Tom. It's Pop of the Morning to you.
Pop of the Morning.
This is a show where we take a look at key, formative pop culture experiences that may have shaped us into the people we are today. We ask, how did that mess me up so bad? Or what has that been doing, rattling around inside of my subconscious all of these years? What kind of facts do I drop? Facts in quote marks, in air quotes. What kind of facts do I drop into conversations thinking they're real world things that I know that really I just saw in a movie and were made up by some screenwriter somewhere, right? How, in other words, do these movies and films and other bits of pop culture ephemera, how do they collect in the junk drawer that is our brain, and how do they impact our experience of the world? Phil, what movie are we looking at this week on Pop of the Morning?
We are looking at Chasing Amy, which I think is a fairly impactful film on both of us, but as I was watching it, I realized I had not seen it probably since I was in my early 20s. Because it's not my favorite Kevin Smith film. So this is Chasing Amy from 1997. Yeah, 1997. A romantic comedy drama written and directed by Kevin Smith, starring Ben Affleck, Joy Lauren Adams, and Jason Lee.
Yeah, that's right. This is a film that I think... it's the third film made by Kevin Smith after his breakthrough debut Clerks in 1994. His second film, Mallrats, got a bigger studio budget and tanked pretty hard. It was kind of a goofier hangout picture, and this movie is I think by far his most narratively, emotionally ambitious film to date. As of 1997. In case it's been a minute for you, it's the story of it's centered actually around comic book creators, which I think is the thing that drew you and I to it, being comic book fans in our teens.
100%, yeah.
Ben Affleck as Holden McNeil and Banky Edwards, played by Jason Lee, are the creators of a comic book Blunt Man and Chronic, kind of an obscene R-rated team of drug-themed superheroes, and they encounter an indie comic creator, Alyssa Jones, played by Joey Lauren Adams, and Holden falls hard for Alyssa, only to find out that she is lesbian, identifies as a lesbian, and the movie kind of runs from there. It's billed as a romantic comedy, and it definitely plays with many of the tropes of romantic comedies, but it does so in definitely a hard R-rated way, as Kevin Smith does.
Yeah,
it's very abrasive, willingly abrasive in terms of its language, its depictions.
Yeah,
but it also is playing with these rom-com tropes in maybe a kind of surprising way, in a way that I hadn't ever really seen happen before when I was a teenager, in that the central crux, the central thing stopping these two characters from being together is the fact that Joey Lauren Adams as Alyssa Jones has no... she's not attracted to men.
Yeah.
To put it bluntly, right? And you don't really see that as being the stumbling block in a lot of rom-coms.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that a fair summary of the plot and the crux of the film, the central conflict?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, okay. I think you have it... It's similar to a lot of romantic comedies where there's the women who are just like, I'm over men, I'm not interested at all, or I'm focused on my career, or that kind of stuff. And so that kind of...
Or my indie bookshop in Seattle.
My indie bookshop in Seattle. Yeah, so there is that disinterest in men, but it's not like this where Alyssa is just straight up, she's a lesbian and has no desire to be with men at all, and does not find men desirable in any real way. So, much different but still similar, I suppose. Still on the similar wavelength, I guess. I don't know how you would put it.
Well, I say that I think it is absolutely aping the style of
right.
Your sort of traditional. Well, the 80s and 90s. The 90s in particular were sort of like the peak for this genre we call the rom-com, right? Like,
yeah.
I feel like those things came out 3 or 4 of them a month in the 90s.
Yeah, pretty much.
And in terms of just the arc of the story, right? This is following that arc. There's this kind of like meet cute at the comic book convention. There's the various sort of stumbling blocks, but Ben Affleck as Holden McNeil keeps trying these sort of grand gestures, followed by his profession of love for Alyssa. But of course, in this movie, none of that stuff works out, and there's no happily ever after in the traditional rom-com sense of that word. This movie is all about, I would say, I think one of the things I like about this movie, right, is that it doesn't have that fairy tale ending, and more so than most romantic comedies, which in that genre typically, we're concerned with the external factors keeping the characters apart, right? It's the circumstances of their work life, the circumstances of the geography of their family situation. There's always some set of obstacles that they have to overcome to end up happily ever after. Yeah. But in Chasing Amy, I think one of the things that struck me as I watched this film again, which I hadn't seen in many years either. I couldn't tell you the last time I saw this film. What struck me about it was just how much this was like about internal challenges and internal growth, and how much really this is a movie about Holden McNeil.
Yeah.
As a hetero white dude coming to terms with the fact that he thinks he can saunter into this situation and turn on the charm and get what he wants. There's this sort of entitlement that radiates off of him, that he can literally snap his fingers and change someone's sexual orientation because he wants it.
Yeah.
And the arc here is like him coming to terms with the fact that he is kind of, like that's just not how it is. You don't always get what you want. And it's sort of condescending and
it's not
harmful, hurtful.
It's not only that, but it's a lot. And I mean, I feel like I've been dancing around it, but it's not just that she's a lesbian, but that she had a hoe phase in her past life, with meaning she had group sex. She had sex with men, multiple partners. Had stuff filmed. Did just weird in public locations. That she just had an adventurous sex life when she was younger.
Yes.
And she does not make apologies for it, which is amazing to see in a film. And she owns it, but she has moved past that. And Holden, when he finds out about it, cannot move past it. Because to him,
it's all he can think about.
It's all he can think about. Because to him, he's the conquering hero, hero in quotes, where he has come as the straight man and brought the woman from the other side, like this lesbian.
I'm gonna
into the other.
I'm gonna show you what love is, baby.
All you need really is just as Jason Lee puts it. So spoiler: this heavy warnings. This is going to have a lot of dirty language because we're going to be quoting from
not for children.
Not for children. Yeah. But as Jason Lee puts it, all the woman really needs is some deep dickin'. Some good deep dickin'. Even a man, even a man needs that. He's like, I can understand gay men because they need deep dicking.
There's a real thread of homophobia, homoeroticism in a lot of directions in this film.
Yeah, there's a lot. But Jason Lee's character, Banky Edwards, plays around with that quite a bit, where a lot of characters say, like, Banky, you need to just come out, accept who you are. And Banky is, like, very much a homophobic, ranting comic nerd I think you.
Let's.
I think both of us have encountered it at different times in our
Let's
lives.
face it, you and I knew that guy.
Yeah.
Whether it was in comic books, whether it was in we played in rock and roll bands. We knew that guy. Many iterations of that guy. There are probably times where we I hate to say it, flirted with being that guy as insecure young men. We were that guy.
Yeah.
At times,
especially when you're entering nerddom, and when Kevin Smith is at the height, and the language is coming out like this, and we sometimes you don't see the whole film, or even when you see it, you don't process the whole film.
No,
and so there was like nerds older than us going to see this film and taking away that they should be like Banky Edwards. You know what I mean?
Banky is the hero.
Banky is the hero. Banky's a reasonable guy, and I'm allowed to say all these words away from sensitive ears, as Banky says. And so they bring it into this and are saying it in this area of the comicdom, and then we're coming in as younger people, as like tweens or early teens, and seeing this, around us and thinking, oh God, this is how we're going to have to act to be. This is
how men behave.
Yeah, this is how
men behave.
Yeah, because we've already experienced this with jocks and shit like that, and we were trying to get away from that, and then we're in the comic book world, and they're like, oh well, it's the same, whether it's in the locker room or in the back of a comic store, and it's fucked up, and
it is, and it's we should make T-shirts. Because I think we managed to work this phrase into almost every episode of the show, but it is textbook toxic masculinity, right? It is this sort of weaponization of homophobic slurs, of misogyny, you name it, the objectification of women through his. There's just so many levels on which. Banky in particular is a problematic character.
Yeah.
I will say, right, like,
but I mean,
it's 100% true that Kevin Smith is playing this for laughs.
Yeah.
I will say, though, as an older, more mature person, while some of that stuff still makes me cringe, it makes me cringe to watch and listen to.
My jaw hit the floor.
I was actually
pretty early on. I was like, I didn't remember some of this stuff. I was like shocked to see it.
It's shocking. I will say, though. Again, I guess Kevin Smith is trying to have his cake and eat it too. I will say, though, that if the movie is judgmental of anyone or anything, it is of Banky and Holden, right? Of the two ostensible leads. To Kevin Smith's credit, again, he's having his cake and eating it too. We spend most time with these guys. The movie is through their point of view.
Yeah.
They are also not the guys who get the girl. Their happy ending is the dissolution of their incredibly profitable and promising partnership.
Yeah.
Frankly, over their emotional insecurity, their emotional immaturity, their inability to deal with these insecurities in anything other than a completely toxic way that blows up their friendship and their partnership as creators. This movie is, if anything, I think, a cautionary tale to these kind of small-minded, nasty, backward ways of thinking.
Yeah,
I think it's that. I think it's easy though. I will say though, like as a 16-year-old kid watching this movie, I didn't get that. Yeah. I didn't see that, and I'm sure most people who watch this movie don't see that.
Yeah,
but I can't help but think the joke is on these two guys.
Oh yeah,
if there's a joke.
I'd agree. Yeah, I try to remember what it felt like watching this for the first time, and I think for me it was just eye-opening about the openness of sexuality in general. Coming from the Midwest and coming from a rather conservative background, that stuff was never discussed in any way. Even heterosexual life, like intercourse, was not discussed, or sex was not discussed in any way besides like a very nervous birds and the bees, discussion when I'm like 11. So
in my house, we would rent the VHS from the Quick Stop on Saturday night, and if there was anything sexy in it, my parents would like pause it for a minute and say, "Hey, it's time to go brush your teeth."
Yeah,
like,
leave the room.
6:45. right?
Yeah.
And I chuckle at it, like I understand where they were coming from.
Right.
But yeah, to watch a movie like this, it was suddenly like, oh my gosh.
Oh my God. Not
I don't
only are they
even know
saying
what
dirty words.
I don't even know half of what he's saying.
Yeah, exactly. They're saying dirty words, but then they're talking about things that I'd never even considered.
Yeah.
Like even thought about. Like even had the presence of mind to like imagine. I couldn't even imagine at that point.
To be fair, I think again one of the genius bits of this film is that is the arc of Holden's character.
Yeah, exactly.
To a certain degree, right? He is not as crude and rude as Banky.
Right.
And he has his own mind blown sort of by the frankness. You get these scenes where they're like, Meow Mix, which was a real bar in New York, a real lesbian bar in New York. And he's sitting here listening to Banky holding forth with Alyssa and having a very frank discussion. And he is just like, you can see him, on one hand, yes, sort of like crushed that he's realizing Alyssa is a lesbian and thinking he doesn't have a chance.
Right.
But there's also a degree to which, like, the crudeness and his ignorance is worn on his sleeve. His ignorance of any other kind of sex except, like, heteronormative, penetrative sex.
Yeah.
Sex as a male-centered experience.
Yeah.
He's not a super experienced guy.
Yeah. And not only that, he's just conservative, so as he's finding out these things about Alyssa, he gets upset as if and there's a point where her nickname is Finger Cuffs for having sex with two guys at once. You can imagine. I'll let you figure it out, or just watch the scene where the guy explains it.
Yes.
And his mind is blown, and he's disgusted by it, and he tells her, "You were used," and she comes back, "No, I used them." You think I couldn't have stopped it? Like, to him, it blows his mind that this is how women would behave, or what women would want sexually, because that's not how he learned about it. That's not how he grew up. I mean, and growing up myself, that was, mind blowing to think that women liked sex or wanted sex, because for a lot of it, it was just like, no, that's definitely not. That's something you got to, like, especially with movies, like, that's something you got to talk them into. That's something you got to kind of like finagle your way into, and it just seemed gross. So to have this realization, to him it was horrific. To me, it was like hallelujah. But
yeah, I follow you on that, right? Like you and I are probably the last people who should be commenting on how sensitive, how accurate, how plausible or realistic a portrayal this is of, I don't know that there's a single lesbian. Of course, there's not a single lesbian experience, right?
Right.
And I don't know how successful this movie is on that front. I tried really hard to read some criticism about that in preparation for this episode. The general consensus seems to be that this is not a movie that handles lesbianism itself particularly well. Right. Which again, I think it's I think it's important to remember that while this is maybe in 1997 a pretty rare portrayal of lesbianism, in a Hollywood film, in a relatively mainstream Hollywood film, the movie itself is not really about lesbianism, right? It is about, I think it's, again, we said a minute ago, it's centered on the experiences of Holden in particular, right? This stand-in for a relatively, a kind of person you and I could identify with, a sheltered version of a male.
Yeah.
Who is used to being at the center of the narrative, used to, on some level, being catered to and having his experience being the central and arguably maybe the only important one depicted on screen. You and I have been doing a version of this show now for like a year and a half, and we marvel, looking back at movies from the 80s and 90s, at just how white and male so many of these movies are. Also how casually homophobic so many of them are, especially in the 80s.
Yeah.
Where there are just casual references to just I mean, again, just words I won't even say with reference toward gay and lesbian people. And so to see this film again, like to me it's like this awakening story, which you're alluding to.
Yeah.
And it's not flattering for him either. I think if anything, right, like for me the most powerful part of this narrative is watching Ben Affleck's clumsiness, his awkwardness, his foolishness, frankly at a number of times the ugliness of this white male sense of inadequacy in the face of whole worlds that he didn't know existed, that don't need to involve him, whether that's, a relationship between lesbians, or whether that's someone's historical past, sexual history rather, that are frankly of no relevancy or concern to him. But because he can't control it, because he's not central to that narrative, because he frankly just doesn't have a place there, it literally drives him to this sort of sniveling, desperate, cruel state, right? This guy who starts out being a pretty likable, reasonably charming person just becomes so desperate and petty by the end of this film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite, the absolute favorite scene in the movie is the hockey scene where he's trying to confront her. Obliquely about her past, and it's just in a rare, Kevin Smith is not a visually, he's not known for his visual flair as a director.
Yeah,
lots of people. It looks like this podcast. Two guys facing each other straight on. Right, that's his usual camera work. But here we get that they're sitting next to each other at a hockey game, but we keep getting this nice intercut with the hockey game going out on the rink, and these guys body slamming each other and checking each other so violently. Yeah, as he and Alyssa are parrying verbally with each other. Yeah, just a beautiful scene because it's so painful and ugly. I mean, it is a great scene.
Yeah, that was great. I forgot about that scene, but it was so well done, and that scene kind of exemplifies what you're talking about, where he becomes this sniveling little mess of a man. Where he does not have the balls necessarily to come out and talk to her about it and saying I heard this about you and it bothers me and I just want to bring it up in a relationship and maybe we can work through it. And and instead he dances around this, where even a guy next to where she just blows up at him and understandably and goes, why couldn't you just straight up just tell me in private, or ask me in private? And the guy next to him goes, even I knew what you were getting at, dude. He's like, you weren't being clever, you were just being an asshole.
Right.
And it was just his lack of courage and imagination to think of any other way to handle it.
Well, wielding his hurt like a cudgel, like a weapon, right? At the people around him. Again, this woman who he ostensibly cares about, he's wielding it to hurt her. Yes, and that happens. That's also in part how he tries to win her as well. Let's be real. There's that moment where they're riding in the car, which is also, I think, a highlight. And he just sort of weaponizes this. Oh God, that I'm in love with you, and I don't. I mean, it's I think it's to the testament of Kevin Smith and the actors portraying this, that there's real chemistry between Ben Affleck and Joey Lord Adams. I believe them as just real friends, caught up in the rush of emotion, and they're having fun and they're bantering and doing these crazy things like buying the motel art off of the wall of the diner. I mean, it's so awesome, and then he ruins it. Yeah, he ruins it, right? The friendship, everything. Oh my God! By basically, as again, this sort of conquering hero, right? Yes. I will tell you now what I must have. Yeah. And she's like, don't do this. You don't. He's like, no, I've decided. that I cannot live with myself.
It's and how manipulative it was.
I plant my flag.
What was hard watching this film? As I watched it, I remembered so many, especially like specifically with this one girl that I was like crazy about in college.
That is me.
Yeah, and how
Kevin Smith, see me.
And I wanted to. We were friends, and she had no interest in me romantically, but for what I remember watching that scene and thinking I should say some of these things to that girl because that's
good,
beautiful and moving and emotional. And now that I'm older and have experienced life much more. And also don't have hormones pumping through my brain. I don't, like,
You've been neutered.
been neutered. I just don't. I don't have them at the levels that I used to have. I try to imagine what it was like to even just walk around with that kind of hormones when I was younger. But
dangerous.
But watching it now, I was so embarrassed for myself, so embarrassed for my past self. Like, and I was so ashamed for how I had been with that girl. Spoiler alert, she and I are no longer friends or talk. But because I did go too far too much like he was doing in that. Like his saying of like, he's like, even if there's if you hesitate for a moment, I want you to dwell on that. And I remember thinking that was such a beautiful line when I was younger. Now I think it's so disgusting and so toxic. Like it doesn't mean anything if she's hesitating for a moment. It doesn't mean anything. She could just be scared, for God's sake. It's like, doesn't mean anything.
Of the raving man on the spring in the middle of the night who stopped his car in the street.
Who stopped in the middle of the street, who was your friend, who was like twice your height. It's like...
Right.
Yeah, it was and
is gesticulating wildly and professing his undying love for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Phil, I think that's a powerful testimony that you're offering. And I think it speaks to kind of what I was bringing up when we first started talking about this film, and that is that this movie is following in so many ways the beats of a traditional romantic comedy.
Exactly.
That's supposed to be the moment where the music swells and it's joyful, right? And she whatever the obstacle was, it just melts away, and now we're supposed to get the happy montage of them. Having a good time. And what's so great about this movie is it inverted that, right? You had the happy montage of them as friends,
right,
hanging out, and then you get this profession of love, and it's like a horror movie scene, right? Like again, like you said, in the car, stops the car, pitch black night. There's like not even street lights, right? It is so dark, and it's a torrent. I mean, how they dropped several Olympic swimming pools in the filming of this scene on that car, and then they get out, and then she does, in a rush of emotion, she kisses him. They go back to his place and they hook up. Yeah. And this is again a major point of criticism for folks when they look at this through the lens of like queer cinema, right? That she's supposedly a lesbian. Though I would also argue that even if that's how she's identifying, there's a lot of evidence here to say that she's sexually fluid.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not here. You and I are not the people to arbitrate this. I don't want to get caught on that point.
Yeah.
But it's this horror movie night. They have, again, this moment where it's now physically consummated. But the implication in this movie is that's effectively, am I getting this right? Like a one-time thing? It really doesn't feel like it's an extended moment of them feeling. I guess she talks about how she met a guy, so maybe it's not quite a one-time thing, but this is like a tumble of there's a tumble of emotion here.
Yeah, but the thing, no, she
in which she eventually comes to the realization that this is not working. This is not me. I'm making a horrible mistake.
No, it's not that. She is in love. She says, I met a guy I met someone and I'm so in love. And she plays the what they called the pronoun game. And he was in love as well. So this was actually the rom-com happy ending. They fell in love after that daring confession in the rain. But
except it's the end of the second act, right?
Yeah,
instead
so we see
the end of the movie.
Instead of the ending and roll credits, we see what the work that takes place afterwards with the relationship. And so
that's a better way to put it.
So Holden finds out about finger about her past, confronts her about it at the hockey game.
So he won, quote unquote. He won the day. He had it.
Yeah, and she said, and in the parking lot of the hockey game, she apologizes for saying, I'm sorry I made you believe that you were the first and only guy I've slept with. But every time, it's like it made, but saying it seemed to make you feel better than me saying you were the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
So I just kept rolling with, like, he could not accept that she. Even before that, he could not accept that her, like he did not get the feeling of love and support from her saying, I love you and I want to be with you and you're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And she continued to still want to be with him, even in that parking lot. She wanted to fight for it, and he was just like out for blood.
It wasn't enough for him,
and it wasn't enough
for him.
He had to have that cis male-centered heteronormative feeling of being the conqueror and being the guy who's man enough to win over this lesbian. That was the best feeling for him over love. That was the feeling for him, and that's how he lost it. That's when she was like, "Fuck
that's
you."
it. That's right. Thank you for laying that out more clearly.
I mean,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, even when they were on the couch and he was proposing that threesome with, which I remember watching that, blew my mind. Between him, Alyssa and Banky, Alyssa was still like, I would want to be with you. I still want to be with you. It's what I want.
Right.
And I don't care about anything else that happened in my past. You are enough for me.
But he's saying, I need this. I need this. And there's also, I need this, and my male friend here needs this. We both need it.
You obviously do not feel any attraction towards my male friend.
Yeah.
But to me...
Who has, again, been nothing but horrible to you.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah, and my male friend is attracted to me, probably, and is also attracted to pretty much every woman with a pulse. So he's okay with probably okay with it. But you, I'm just going to say that you should probably just be into this, too, because, I mean,
why can't you get over your hang-ups, lady?
Yeah, like, oh, my God. This guy was like, that scene, I forgot about that scene, and I watched it, and I was like, what is Kevin Smith doing? Why did he write this? And then as it kept going on, it was obvious that Holden wasn't there to like make sense of things. He was making it even worse. He was like throwing it all away in that scene.
Right. Again, he's not supposed to be our hero, right? And I think that scene is there to just make that beyond a shadow of a doubt abundantly clear.
Yeah.
Of just how inappropriate and how unhealthy his emotions are in this case, right? Like the way he's trying to handle this situation, right? Both he and Banky have some real problems independent of each other, right? Setting aside whatever other tensions underlie their friendship, they have some really, really backwards attitudes about women, about relationships, about sex, right? You know, again, not to simplify it here, but like it's like Alyssa is the notch in the bedpost.
Yeah,
she is the trophy lion hung from the wall. The lion's like she is a thing to be acquired, right?
Yeah,
and he must
before love, before before the relationship.
He's literally saying it's not enough.
Yeah,
your love is not enough. You know, she has not really anything to apologize for, apart from, again, misleading him to a degree, right?
Yeah.
About a thing that really was none of his business to begin with,
in
terms of her sexual past.
Yes.
And she owns it, and she apologizes in what feels like a very sincere, heartfelt way.
Yeah.
And he still says, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Right? You gotta stroke my ego a little bit more. You gotta inflate me out a little bit more. And I can't deal with the feeling that in any way you are more than me, or you've had more experiences than I have, or you have some kind of upper hand here. I need to be the dominant, conquering person in this relationship. Kevin Smith has gone on the record of talking about, you know, where some of the inspiration for this film came from. And it came from a few different places, according to Kevin Smith. In part based on his producing partner's attraction to to a lesbian, a filmmaker they met who's a lesbian. The unrequited relationship never went this far. In part, the fact that he has a gay older brother, and wanted to try to bring some sense of queer culture to the screen in something other than as the butt of a joke, as we've so often seen in other films from this period. And then the last thing was the fact that he was dating, and I'm not sure if this is literally Joey Lauren Adams. It might be the actor who plays Alyssa Jones here. He was dating her, and he felt like he was a stocky, backward comic book boy from Jersey, and not that she was specifically more sexually experienced than he was, but that she was a movie star and had lived life. She had traveled. Yeah. She had been to fancy parties, and he is this overweight indie filmmaker obsessed with comic books and marijuana, right?
Yeah.
And his sense of inadequacy derailing that, right? Like he's poo-pooing, she spent time in Bali or something, and he's poo-pooing Bali, but he doesn't even know anything about Bali. It's just a thing he doesn't know about, and it's this kind of like nagging, trying to bring her down and invalidate her. So there's all of these sort of semi-autobiographical threads that are thrown into this movie, right? And so it isn't a stretch to read Holden, played by Ben Affleck, as sort of the stand-in this case for sort of Kevin Smith's inadequacies, right?
Yeah.
His inferiority. But this is his film. He's working it out, and he's offering this cautionary tale, right? I think, again, one of the things I love so much about this movie is that our central character, while he ultimately learns and grows, right? We should mention, right, the whole film ends with this sort of little epilogue, an indeterminate amount of time later, a year later, something like that.
Yeah.
And Holden has, since dissolved the partnership with Banky. They're both working on their own independent projects, and Holden's new project is a comic called Chasing Amy, which seems to be heavily autobiographical, in which effectively, right, this entire graphic novel that he produces is ostensibly the film we just watched, him demonstrating, like stepping outside of himself for a second, which is what Kevin Smith is doing with this movie, and showing the world how foolishly he behaved, how horribly he behaved, and it's actually kind of the rare movie. If you want to challenge me on this, go ahead. I feel like it's the rare movie that puts your white male hero, the star of the film, the only named star in this movie. Ben Affleck's star was on the rise at this point, and makes him, like, literally the whole thing is you're a fool. And the only redemption he gets is this subtle thing at the very end where he sort of is like basically admitting in this little wordless epilogue, almost wordless epilogue, that he was an idiot. And he's not trying to win her back. He's just more or less just saying, I'm really sorry. That was like a lifetime record for being an idiot. I guess I feel like that's actually a pretty daring, unconventional thing to do.
Yeah, I would say so. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if I've seen something like that before, and I can't.
There's no excuses made for it beyond the fact that he was. I couldn't get over myself, right? I was petty. I was small. I brought it out on you, on my friend. You get the impression that he hasn't been seen in public until you see him turn up at this Comic-Con, right? He hasn't been seen in public. He's been slaving away over these pages. Nobody's seen him. They're all surprised to see him turn up, and he makes reference to the fact that no publisher wanted this. He just printed up 500 copies sort of as like a penance, right? It's him finally working through his stuff. And I gotta hand it to Kevin Smith, right? Like, if this really is as autobiographical as he's saying, it kind of is a really impressive gesture to see this person up on screen taking moments from his own life and saying, God, I was an idiot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Look how dumb I looked. Do you guys see how dumb I looked?
Yeah.
But of course, we were so dumb as young men. We were so dumb that we walked out of the movie thinking, yeah.
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 Here's how dumb we were.
That way to be.
Kevin Smith as Silent Bob breaks his silence in this film. I remember being blown away by it.
Delivers an epic monologue. Yeah.
Yeah. Gives an epic monologue, breaking down how Holden and the audience of men should feel and move forward.
Explicit. It's like almost directly at the camera.
Exactly. Explicitly telling us how we should feel and move forward and get over ourselves. It said multiple, not just the ending, but it said directly before that by Silent Bob, and we still walk away going, "Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah." I'm gonna be like, I'm
lesbians.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, or like again, he's the great conquering romantic hero.
Yeah,
right. That we should be identifying with Holden in a not in a sort of like oh my God, I'm uncomfortably seeing myself up there on the screen and I don't want to be like that. We're still sitting here identifying with him and saying, man, I'm sorry it didn't work out for him, but those were some good lines he had. I'm going to use those for me, right? Like how dense.
Well, it was such a
dense.
You know what it was? It was that moody, shitty feeling. I don't know if you had this when you were younger, of like, oh, poor old me. I'll never get the girl, but maybe there's a chance. But if I don't, then that's also a really strong feeling, and I can be heroic. Being the miserable so and so in the corner, pining after someone who's not interested in me.
I was right, and it was her mistake.
Yeah, that kind of bullshit.
I'm wearing you down, baby. I'm wearing you down.
Oh God, yeah. It's Silent
Bob says, right? He literally says, right? By the time I figured all this out, it was too late, man. She had moved on, and all I had to show for it was some foolish pride, which by then gave way to regret. Right? She was the girl, I know that now, but I pushed her away. So I've spent every day since then chasing Amy, so to speak. Right? It's the titular line from the movie. Like, how much more direct can Kevin Smith get in telling you, you idiots, you think you're the hero of this story. You think you're the hero. But really, right? Let's imagine this movie, if you will, a little like Wayne's World style, doodle-doo, doodle-doo, doodle-doo. And imagine this movie if it were directed and written from Alyssa's point of view, or the point of view of any number of females that you and I have attempted to, let's politely say, woo. Charitably, let's say woo over the years.
Yeah. Oh, God.
I mean, it looks a lot like that scene in the car.
Yeah.
That uncomfortable, rainy horror scene where you and I just both want to, we're both sitting here again as older, hopefully a little bit wiser men. Yeah. Oh, I want to get in there and scream, get out of there! Get out of there! In the horror movie, right? You always want to scream, get out of there. He's in the house, right?
Yeah.
He's in the car. He's right in front of you. Get out of there!
Oh, God.
You should have walked. The mistake you made was you didn't start walking sooner, right?
Yeah.
You heard him out. As soon as you stopped that car, you should have popped that lock and gone back to the diner. Oh, man. I think again, this movie is such an odd duck. And I want to give Kevin Smith, again, it's not a perfect film. There's, like we said, there's a lot of, the humor is uncomfortable at times, very uncomfortable. There's a fair amount of creaky scenes, and we're not the people to comment on how accurate portrayal is or how sensitive portrayal is here of queer culture, but I do want to take off my hat to him and commend him for trying to write this movie, which is, he knows his audience. Kevin Smith has made a 30-year career now out of basically like recognizing that his audience is a bunch of mostly white guys who are meat-headed, heavy-handed, looking to him for guidance and advice, quoting his words back to him. Yeah. And here he's trying to make a movie that turns these rom-com tropes on their head, throws in more than a heavy dose of toxic masculinity and does its best to make it look ugly and unappealing at so many turns. And I gotta say, right, like, how many of us Kevin Smith View Askew fans just missed it?
Yeah.
How many men in life? I mean, there's not a lot of movies like this.
Yeah.
But how many men in life just miss it?
Could just be us.
Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, it's funny how that stuff works, where you watch it when you're older and you're just like, why would I walk away thinking that when I was, 20 or younger or whatever it was, thinking this
seems so obvious now.
Yeah. How did I miss that? How did I filter it in that way? It's such a strange experience. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to hammer it over men's head. I mean, I think it's the problem of like
this movie was the hammer. This movie tried to be the hammer.
I think it's the problem of like our by that point our brains are programmed by other movies and society and shit, and so we're watching that and we're thinking one thing, unless we're like the lucky few who uses it to have an epiphany. Right. But we don't get a choice in that. That just has to come, if we're lucky, like some media or somebody saying something will, trigger this idea of like, oh, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Well, it's the proper role for a man. It's the role of a man I've seen portrayed, some variation on this in so many films.
Yeah.
Around me in so many places. And it, I think in a lot of ways it validates the premise of this podcast, not to pat ourselves too hard on the back, but this notion that like we imbibe of pop culture, right? We breathe this stuff in like the air. And we take in, just like you're not aware of what you're breathing in, the toxins, the pollutants, the viral load, we've all of these things that you breathe in that you're not aware of, but that impact you, that it affect the health of your body and your lungs, right?
Yeah.
And I think maybe viral load is the metaphor to go with here. You watch a movie like this and you reflect back on it and you think about all of the noxious, harmful things that you take in and that perhaps more dangerously you take to be normal.
Yeah.
You just take to be the way it is. And how often do we pause as men, as consumers of media, let's go bigger and say as consumers of media, as participants in this broader culture, how often do we really stop and think about what it is that we've just put into our brains?
Yeah.
And I think we could all just be more active participants. I think about our, your school days when your ELA teacher told you to go home and read a chapter in the novel and come back tomorrow ready to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think about how many adults or how many kids, how many people would just benefit from doing that with so many of the things that we take in. And we label it as pop culture. We label it as trash. We label it as it's just on in the background. And how much of that stuff we take in without ever really doing the hard work of processing what we've just seen and heard.
Yeah,
being an active member of the audience, an active participant in our own entertainment.
Yeah. I agree. I mean,
I got to say, one thing I was going
to say, there's a scene. I mean, I think some of us learned that. That's one of the takeaways I think we had from something like Chasing Amy. Like the beginning, well, we haven't even talked about the character Hooper, but the Hooper and Banky.
Let's talk about Hooper. Let's talk about Hooper.
But it just the takeaway here is like, I want to first make the point that, like, you know, Hooper and Banky have this discussion about, like, is Archie and Jughead in a gay relationship? Is there subtext there? While Hooper is, you know, making the argument for pro and Banky against. It's pretty much what we do. And I remember being so enamored with that idea of, like, us being able to read something and to have a weird theory and idea about it and, like, pull it apart. And we did that. I mean, we're still doing that now, but we've done that for most of our lives.
It's true. And that is second nature to, like, fans of comic books and sci-fi, that you try to interpret
but
the vagaries of something.
We've taken it, hopefully, another step, and others should do it too, taking another step of, like, how is it, like, affecting us personally, and not just, like, there's a weird theory going, there's a weird theory of, like, Jughead and Archie being gay. It's like, what are we seeing in Archie? What is Archie trying to represent with American culture?
Yeah, right.
In the panels. Right. That's
the latent homophobia that lurks beneath the underbelly of Riverdale. Yeah. I think that homoeroticism, I should say, not homophobia, the homoeroticism. But you brought up Hooper, who is I think such a great character, and it's actually kind of a crime we haven't remarked on. There's just so much to talk about here that we haven't remarked on him earlier in this episode. Hooper, who in the name of selling his comic, of marketing it, you know, portrays himself as sort of like an angry black nationalist militant figure. Yeah, he's dressed like a Black Panther, not the Marvel version, but like the Freddie Hampton version, all black and leather, grim face, and he's kind of at this comic panel on minority comic creators. And he's ranting about the white man and the Nubians, and it's just this incredibly impassioned rant.
What's a Nubian?
And then he's got these. He's got Holden and Banky, who come in as, like, heels, as plants. Yeah. To egg him on, to stoke his rage. At which point he finally pulls out a gun with a blank in it and fires it at Banky, who pretends to fall over dead as the hall clears, people screaming. And then he jumps off the stage, and he's a complete pussycat of a man, right? Yeah. He's gay and very open about it, and the whole veneer of this, sort of militancy drops away. Yeah. He's kind and joking and giggling and teasing and being teased. And he is the kind of guy that the kind of guy you'd love to hang out with. He's hilarious, right? Yeah. It's all a put on, and he acknowledges it directly, right? As a queer black man, right? A minority within a minority in this country.
He called it like a minority of a minority within a minority, or something like that. It was like three layers deep when he said it. I can't.
I have to position myself, right, in a way to sell my books, right? I have to do what sells. Yeah. And you see it again where he's in the record shop later with Holden, and they're hanging out, talking, having a pretty serious, earnest conversation, and he's ribbing Holden about his backwards attitudes about sex, and then the kid walks up and wants his comic book signed. Yeah. and Hooper looks at Holden, he says, "See that man right there? He's the enemy.
He's the devil."
Right? He's the devil. Don't you forget it. And the kid just glares at him. And again, I think this speaks to what you were talking about too, about the way that we should do more. We should question the subtext, and we should pull apart these theories and these interpretations. We should also ask more questions about who is the author of what we're viewing, of what we're reading, of the pop culture we're consuming. How much do they believe their own shtick? Yeah. And how much of that is postured to make it through the traditional channels of what's acceptable in a major blockbuster. It calls to mind recent kind of, it shouldn't be a surprise that Disney is not the most progressive media conglomerate in the world, but you have Pixar who has all of these incredibly sensitive and really talented artists, writers, creators making emotionally rich, beautiful pieces of film. But apparently the word from on high is that nothing in those films can be queer or is even supposed to even have the subtext of being queer. You can't have a secondary character who's LGBTQ plus. Because again, you don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers, rock the boat too much. And Disney has all these gay days at their parks, right?
Yeah.
Where they are welcoming to the LGBTQ community. But in terms of portrayal, they won't go that far because they might upset, I guess, the Christians. The bottom line, they might get a boycott at their film from a homophobic or racist person. Is that the kind of person you want seeing?
I think the problem is that they won't be able to show it overseas in China, which is like their largest market apparently. Or maybe their second largest market. I think it's probably their largest market right now.
So you get these weird situations where they tell you that like LaFoe in the Beauty and the Beast remake is gay, and how do you know it? Because well, we told you he was.
Yeah,
there's a fleeting moment where like in the background where he like pecks a man on the cheek or something.
Yeah. It's like a weird, but.
Representation.
It's so strange. I mean, even get off topic, but it's even in Disney's past. I saw recently that, and I think it was an animator that passed away, but he was like he was like an openly gay animator, I think, for Disney.
Yeah.
Maybe he may not have been openly gay, but he was a gay animator for Disney, and I saw him up on Twitter, and he had animated a majority of Disney's villains through the past, like Scar. God, the Little Mermaid one. I can't remember the Little Mermaid. Hades. And
Ursula.
Ursula and Hades.
Yeah.
And
all of whom are coded as gay.
It's coded as gay, and people were shocked. I was shocked to learn that they were animated by this gay animator, and apparently he had kind of brought that in order to have some kind of representation, because there wasn't, and that was his foot in the door. It's
the one thing he kind of had some control over.
Yeah,
that
I
really
don't know how much of that
this.
is true, because it's a Twitter thread, but I found it very interesting. Yeah,
but Hooper. Here's Kevin Smith is kind of intentionally or not. Maybe it's just for the jokes. He's pointing us to this larger idea that we should be more critical, suspicious of. We should interrogate more deeply, maybe the intent of the people who are creating the pop culture we ingest.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that Hooper doesn't have any kind of black pride. I'm not saying anything that he doesn't believe what he says at all. But 100%, right? He is playing a character. He's performing in a way that is.
But I don't know if if we should be scrutinizing Hooper as much as scrutinizing the system that he has to play to get into, because it's like
that. That's my
very
point.
Much,
yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's very much like
that's
sorry to bother you, where you have to put the white voice on, but it's like the opposite. He has to put on the You have to be more urban. Which there's a whole movie out there about that, which is like I can't remember. It's like Black Hollywood. It's the same guy who's and I mentioned this often to you. The guy who did Meteor Man.
Meteor Man. Yeah.
He had this whole
film we should do on this podcast.
Being black in Hollywood. There's a whole film for that, and I can't remember the name of the film. But there's points where, as a black person going into a film, white actors and casting will ask you to be more urban. And what that means is be more black. And what that means is be more black as framed by a white...
Talk like, quote-unquote, a rapper or, quote-unquote, a gangster.
By a white person. Yeah, in the eyes of a white person.
Right.
So it's like...
Yeah, that is exactly. Thank you for articulating that better than I was. That's exactly the point. I'm not blaming Hooper. I'm not calling him. I'm not insulting him at all.
Yeah.
but his portrayal here, his depiction, points to this larger issue in entertainment. Let's say in Hollywood, in music, right, where you have executives, where you have a system, where you have, at the very least, some common received wisdom about what sells, why it sells, how it sells, what the quote unquote the rules are, what will be accepted by the hetero white male moviegoer. He won't go see a movie like that. Yeah. We need to whatever. It boils like Netflix, right? When they they'll take the little icons, the little thumbnails, right? And they will tailor these thumbnails on your Netflix account, Phil, to what they perceive you to be. They know about your demographics, and you will get different thumbnails than, let's say, my wife would for the exact same movie. They have worked it out to, like, this is more appealing to women of a certain age, this is more appealing to kids, this is more appealing to straight men, this is more appealing to gay men. Well, they know you.
Yeah, they know me.
You're Mr. Vanilla.
Yeah.
And I think Hooper speaks to, again, we're looking at so many different varied manifestations of this, but it's easy to bemoan how crass and stupid pop culture is.
Yeah.
I don't mean to start a whole thing here again. We're getting all over the place, but look at the Transformers movies, the Fast and the Furious movies, these movies that in so many ways are geared, quote unquote, right down the middle at, quote unquote, your average typical male viewer of some perceived demographic and what they want out of a movie.
Yeah.
I think about the crassness and the hard-headedness of so much pop culture, like the loudness of it, the rudeness of it, the homophobia of it. We've talked about the manifestations through the 80s and 90s where it just felt like you had to have this homophobic joke in a movie that is in no other way related to sexuality. That's the one joke. Why? I don't know. Just to make sure you didn't think it was a gay movie.
Yeah.
Why is that stuff in there? It's because somebody on the other end thinks it needs to be. They think that's what's going to sell. And how amazing would it be if we let some of those preconceived notions go for a minute?
Yeah.
How much more interesting, maybe how much less mean would our pop culture be if we weren't trying to play up to some white man executive's idea about, well, this is what's always sold, so it's what must sell.
Yeah,
it's a digression from the main theme of the film, but
I mean, it's interesting. I wonder how some of that stuff gets pushed through, but then we know, like, for Hollywood films, they go see, like, peer groups. They go get, like, what do they call that? I can't remember the
focus group.
Focus group. Yeah, they go through focus groups. So there's focus groups to blame.
Yeah,
which also. I didn't think about this until someone had pointed it out or I read it somewhere. But the focus group's probably made up of, like, Hollywood wannabes or would-bes or has-beens. Yeah. Kind of floating around that area and putting
they're in LA. Do you like movies?
Yeah. Some would-be directors going, you know what? Maybe I would, say the F word here because it seems kind of gay here. Yeah,
those guys were being too nice to each other on screen. It made me feel uncomfortable.
So there's that. But I mean, we talk about not being beholden to it. Like, there's that Pixar movie Turning Red about a young Asian girl in Canada turning into a giant red panda. I've not seen it yet.
It's great. I watched it last weekend with my daughter. It was awesome. Yes,
I'll have to check it out. But it's there again with Twitter, and I don't thing. But there was a guy. It wasn't a Twitter, but somebody had shared a review that this guy wrote. And I can't remember for what publication, but the guy wrote how it was tiring watching this movie because he couldn't relate because it was about a young Asian girl in Canada. And he understands. He's like, I know that they're trying to broaden, but why can't they make one like something that I can relate to? It was literally
Where
like
are
that.
all the movies about white men in L.A., hetero white men in L.A.? We're an endangered species.
Yeah, and you think about all these like young Asian women growing up who had to start seeing themselves in fucking Captain America or something like that,
Right,
because there's nothing else out there. And then when they finally get a movie, the white guy's like, it was a chore to watch this because I could not put myself in that place. Like,
Phil, I don't know how you could have chosen a better way to bring this episode full circle, because it sounds like you found Holden, and he is out there. He's on Twitter, and he just reviewed Turning Red. Is that? I mean.
Jesus.
A big whiny, but where am I in this? Where are all of the movies about hetero white men getting what they want?
Oh my God.
Can we get another Indiana Jones movie? That's what I think the world is really missing.
God forbid Indiana Jones passes the torch over to a black woman. The world's going to be set on fire. It was already messed up when he was passing it to like a young God, what's his name? I'm so bad
Shia
with this.
LaBeouf.
Shia
LaBeouf.
Yeah, people were kind of up in arms about that. I mean, besides the film itself, but it's like, oh man.
Phil, if you could take one piece of advice, one lesson from the movie Chasing Amy, and relay it back to your younger, cringier,
oh my God,
self, but only one piece.
One piece.
What would you like him to take away from the movie Chasing Amy? This younger, more hormonal, marginally more awkward version of yourself. What would you want him to take away from this film?
Jesus, there's so many lessons. There's so many lessons. I think mostly I'd want him to chill out with his relationships with women. Not every female friend is a potential romantic partner. Because I think at that time, when I was younger, my brain could not understand, like, if we're getting along so well this way as friends, we definitely will get along well, as a couple. I mean, that'd be great. And I cannot separate those. So there's been, like, friendships that I have lost or have been rocky in the past that did not end well. And, that's something. I think that would be the one factor or one piece of advice I'd give to younger me. I don't know if I'd listen to it, honestly, but I would try.
No, it's good advice. It's good advice. Yeah, I think that's great advice, and that also does speak to that ultimate conundrum, right? How much of this stuff is just stuff you have to learn. I like to, the idealist, the optimist in me wants to think that we can maybe break the cycle, and maybe we do in small ways, and that maybe we can spare the younger generation some of the ugliness, the awkwardness, and frankly the pain. Set aside the awkwardness of like how embarrassing it is to be Holden McNeil, but the pain inflicted on people like Alyssa Jones. How many women like Alyssa Jones around the world, right? Would be so much better if young men saw a movie like this and got the damn point.
Oh my God! Yeah, if there was, I think about sometimes if there was like texting and stuff.
I wish Kevin Smith would have.
When we were younger, I would have been so much. It would have been posted to like, look at this guy, it's so embarrassing, and it would have been like
there would have been a written record,
10 texts in a row, unanswered, of me just going, "Hey, what's going on? How are you doing?" Oh God, yeah.
I mean, I wish again, just Kevin Smith could have just been a little bit more blunt about what he was trying to say with this film.
Just a little bit more. We cannot get it through our thick skulls.
Looking directly at the camera and saying, "I've regretted it every day of my life."
Yeah.
Chasing Amy. Oh.
Or just just recording that line over and over again with different names for men, for boys. And be like, Phil, listen to me. Tom, listen to me. I've regretted it. Oh, my God. Yeah.
He tried. He really did try.
He did try. It's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking when we were talking about, if only we could have, spare the younger versions of ourselves, or like the current generations, like that pain and embarrassment. But it was like, it's the pop culture brain, we have. But I was thinking of I think it's the Seinfeld scene where it's like, careful, that plate's hot. And then they touch it and go, and they go, I told you that was hot. And he's like, well, I didn't know how hot, what hot meant to you. Like how hot was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those things.
I think that's about right.
I think it's just one of those things that we just have to hopefully learn as we grow up.
Yeah. Hopefully learn.
Hopefully learn.
That's it. That's it. Hopefully learn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Phil, if our viewers, our listeners would like to inflict any further pain on themselves using this show, previous episodes, upcoming episodes, where can they get a little bit more of Pop of the Morning in their lives?
They could go check out cosmicblair.com, and then I would recommend going to Patreon. We got a link there, and Patreon we do post a lot more stuff, and we're always looking for feedback on what else we should post. We do take subject recommendations through the Patreon. So we did Rushmore, which was from a patron, and
it's a viewer request. Yeah,
I think Mrs. Doubtfire was a request too.
Also a patron suggestion. Yes.
Yeah. So you can go over there.
If you've got a movie, a film, a record, show you'd like us to talk about, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and we know gas prices are going up, so we're doing it for just as little as $1 a month. You can help support the whole network, not just Pop of the Morning, but the whole network at patreon.com/Cosmic Blair.
Makes a big difference. But the biggest difference, if you want to support the show, the biggest thing you can do is tell a friend about this show. You got a friend who likes Chasing Amy? Are you friends with Kevin Smith? Is your name Jason Mewes? One of the best things you can do is tell a friend how much you enjoy Pop of the Morning or any other podcast that we put out on the Cosmic Blair Network. Word of mouth is a powerful tool. It's better than even like just clicking that share button. Send a little testimonial text along with it. Let them know what you like about it. We really appreciate that. Word of mouth is how so many of our listeners have found the show, and so please don't break the chain. Please pass the word on if you like what you hear here on Pop of the Morning.
Yeah.
Phil, what are we covering next time on Pop of the Morning?
Oh, man, next time we've got a good one from 1971. It's Harold and Maude. Been a while since I've watched this. I've seen it a couple times in my life, but it's been a minute, and I'm excited about it.
I can't wait. Harold and Maude. I'm excited for that one too. It's, we're on a hell of a run. Well, Harold and Maude next time, featuring the music of Cat Stevens. I can't wait.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's going to be good.
Yeah. The soundtrack. Yeah. Talk
about a romantic comedy.
That is a romantic comedy. Well, until that time, I remain Tom.
And I'm Phil. And this is Pop of the Morning. I guess we'll talk to you later. We're still coming up with an ending slogan.
Pop of the Morning to you.
Pop of the Morning. Oh, bad.